Hello, hello, and welcome back. I'm Claire. This is Purple Poppy. We're on Sunday stitching, and we're back to our book. Now, I have done some bits and pieces while you've been away because I don't want this to go on for forever. So, while you were gone, I picked out some lace just to line the inside and cover all of that stitching that was there. I then decided that I would like to have a pocket here. So what I've basically done is I've pulled out a piece of cotton that I've just tea-dyed, and then I've put on lots of odd little pieces of lace to make that pocket decorative. And I just quickly did a tag to go inside. Now, we'll talk about the tag in a bit, but then I also did my first page. So each page is going to be completely decorated in my book. Obviously you can do yours however you want, in some shape, form or description, in the style of a paper journal. So on this one I've taken a piece of fabric. Sorry, I've got lots of pins going on. A piece of fabric that was the same size. I've done an invisible stitch all the way around the end. I then took a contrasting fabric, folded it over to make a belly band. I've stitched it. Oh, and then I stitched on this like a plique piece. I've stitched it at the top and in the middle and at the bottom. And then I made these two what would normally be journaling cards. I mean, you could write on the back if you wanted to. I put a very thin piece of wadding in the middle, and I've blanket stitched all the way around the edge. So now I've got two journaling cards in my belly band on my first page. The tag, excuse me, I wanted to do in pink because this is a pink page. Okay, we've got calm colour here. So all I did was I took some of this fusible interfacing and I've ironed it onto there, and it's just made it that little bit stiffer. So then I can put a different fabric that coordinates on the back, and I can in due course stitch all the way around. If you wanted to, you could use something like steam and seam, and then obviously that would stick both sides, but I want to put as much stitching as I can. So you see I've got stitching here to apply all these pieces on to this piece of cotton, and then I can stitch the cotton into the pocket. Yeah, I've got the tag to stitch. I've already done this page, and then attached to that page will be this page, and this page I've done in like patchwork. I've just put little bits of different fabrics to make like a patchwork, again using that fabric and the fabric that's on the back of it, keeping a bit of consistency. And then I've put this lace, decorative lace piece that I've got to act as another pocket. And then on this page, which I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do with yet, I've just cut a piece of lace. This is out of an old dress from a charity shop, and I've laid that onto that page, and I've taken a piece of the fabric that I used to make the belly band, and I've just put that over as a tab. So you can see that, whoops, let's get rid of all that. You can see that sticks out there. And again, this will eventually be stitched to this page. So I'm not going to decorate this page. I'll be decorating the other side and then stitching them together. So each page in my book will be 2 pages. Okay, so there's some homework for you if you like. And obviously my homework will be getting all these pieces stitched down that are only pinned at the moment. Okay, And then I just did another sort of journal card. Now what I did here was I used this text stamp to stamp on, and I used these flowers. I can't remember which one. This one, I think, on this one. And I put that in there. And the way I got the blank was I just pulled out a piece of paper that was, you know, bigger than that. So I cut a square. Let's do it, shall we? So I cut a piece of paper like this, and about there, because that will just take that stamp. Okay, I'll put that on there, and then I stamped over the top like that, so that the stamping didn't go in that space, and I then added that stamp to the space. And then because obviously it's stitchery, I just added this sort of faux flower that I stitched all the way through. Again, a little bit of wadding, you can see, and then a different fabric, and then I've just stitched it all the way around the edge. And then I'll decide whether, because I've done the flowers in pink, whether this is gonna stitch on here as a pocket or a side tuck, or even just a decorative piece, because I've got the pink, but now I've got the blue, so we can go into a bit of a blue phase, whatever. Okay, so that's what I've done so far. And then I wanted an envelope. We always have envelopes in our journals, don't we, the paper ones? So what I did was I took a piece of this pinky blue fabric. Looks like we're having a lot of pink and blue in here, doesn't it? And I cut it, you can see, I cut it all the way down an A4 piece, so it's 8 1/4, and then on the 11 and a bit side I come across 8 1/4 again, so that it was a square. I laid it on my messy mat and I coated it in PVA. I thought if anybody didn't have any strengthener, then an easy strengthener would be PVA glue. And I just poured it all over, and you can see it's really stiff now compared to how the fabric would normally be. And then what I'm going to do is, this is an envelope template. Now I actually got this template by cutting the card on my envelope punch board. Now if you're not someone who works with paper, the chances are you won't have an envelope punch board. But what you probably have got is an envelope that you can take to pieces, can open it up, I'll find one in a minute, and then you'll give yourself a template for your envelope. Now I've moved this, so that's not brilliant, but hey ho. And then this one, and this one. So I'm basically just cutting the fabric to match the template that I've got, and then on this one across there. So now you can see it obviously looks exactly the same as this. So put it back on here, and we fold it across there. We fold it across, and again across, and then down. We have created, take our cardboard out, we've created a fabric envelope very, very easily, just like that. Okay, now I'm going to cut off obviously all these strands, get rid of them. We've got some more here. This is where I tore the fabric and it was fraying before I glued it. Okay, so that comes in there, that comes in there, and that sits on there. Look, envelope, beautiful. As I say, if you've got, I don't know what this is I've written, but you've got an envelope, you can just pull at the glue tabs. I know this is a different shape, this one, and instantly you will see that you've got a template to make your envelope with. Okay, and then obviously just stitch it in the places that it was glued. Simple as that. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a little bit of glue stick on here and on here, so the two sides of the bottom flap, and I'm going to do that, just hold it in place while I stitch. So in my stitchery bag, what have we got? Oh, I think, shall we use the gold? I think the gold will work lovely on there, won't it? So let's get a needle. There's one. And take this creamy colour out. So how are you all? You're happy, safe and well? Right, so we've thread ourselves a needle, and I'm just going to do very basic running stitch. If you want to do something more elaborate, then obviously you can. I'm going to slide my needle between those two layers to give me a hiding place for that knot. So just tuck your knot in, and then I've got my hand inside to make sure that I do not stitch my envelope closed. I'm just feeding backwards and forwards, trying to make sure that the stitches are roughly the same size, like that. I come all the way up, and then you can either obviously tie it off, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it decorative, and I'm going to go all across the opening and then back down the other side. So very basic stitches, nothing complicated. At the end of the day, I just want to show you in this sort of mini series that it is very simple to convert what you're doing in paper normally into fabric, or if you're someone who only works in fabric, you know what people who do work in paper do. Okay, see now I've actually gone, come here, I've actually gone too far there, can you see that? So I'm actually going to pull my thread all the way out off the needle and rethread it. Simple stuff, but, and I have noticed there is a number of people now that are stitchers that started to do junk journaly type things, and I think, do you know what, let's do it. I mean, I've always mixed paper and glue together, paper and glue, paper and fabric together in my journals anyway, but if you've only worked in one medium before and i.e. fabric, and you know, then you may not have things like the stamps that I used on that journal card. You don't need to rush out and buy stamps. Have a good hunt through your fabric stash. See if by any chance you've got some fabric that looks a bit like newspaper, or if you really haven't got anything with words on that looks a little bit like newspaper, then take a piece of something like this. Take this piece here, you could thread paint that, make it decorative in that way. So then I'm gonna scoot through there, tie a knot, pull it all the way through, and then I'm just gonna feed my needle back to the inside because I don't want that strand on the outside. Pull it all the way in like that, and take my scissors and give it a snip near the bottom. Now, you don't have to stiffen your fabric to make the envelope. I just feel like it works better when it's got a little bit of stiffness to it, okay? And if you really wanted to, and you don't want that point, I was going to use my corner rounder, but again, if you're a fabric person, you probably won't have one. You can just snip off a little straight bit there, got a little bit of random glue. Okay, and then normally what we'd do if we were doing a paper journal is we'd find an appropriate page, so probably be this one. We'd pop the envelope around the page like this, so that we could use this as a tuck spot. So you might stitch it to say there, and then you can tuck this under the edge there, yeah, because you've got a line. But before you do that, you really want that your page has got a background on it. So I suppose I could come back here because I've got the pink background. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. There it is. Oh, excuse me. Right, so you do need your background. So pop that on there. There you go. Make sure it's right up to the edge. And then this piece will be able to tuck under there. So what you're going to have to do is make sure that you leave yourself a space. So we're going to do our envelope to about there. Okay. So laying this on here. Oh, I'm sorry about the whiny children outside. It's still summer holidays. And then that's going to go about there. Okay. And then of course that's attached, and that can tuck under there. And you can still do something else on the background. So let's stitch this onto here. We could use our same gold thread, so then it will match with our envelope closing area. So finding the line of my pin, is, can you see that? Which is about there. And now I'm going to go through. So again, I'm just going to run a running stitch. Take that pin out, because that's now attached to this piece. Okay. Across. Now there is a pin underneath there that was holding the lace on, so I need to pull that out to make sure we don't stitch any pins into our book. Somebody picks it up later and gets stabbed. We don't want that, do we? Okay, there you go. So now, I mean, I haven't closed it off yet, but you can see there's my line of stitching. That's where the page folds, and that's now given us that tuck spot that goes there like that, just like a paper journal. And then if you wanted to, you could make yourself a bit of a flower or put a nice big button on there. What have I got here? Well, you could do both actually. You could, that's the wrong colour. Oh, there's a nice button. It is sort of the wrong colour, but we could bring it back into being. So if you go through the fabric bits that you've set aside for this project, I mean, I've got here this like maroon flower lace, so might be a bit dark for that, but let's try it and see. So if I snip the actual flower out of it, again, this was a dress from a charity shop. I was quite fortunate in that about 5 years ago these were all the rage, these lacy dresses, and therefore the shops were sort of full of them as people had worn them for a special event or whatever, and you know, they didn't want to hold on to them, and I managed to get one in just about every colour. I don't know if you're as lucky now. I don't know if, you know, all the supplies have sort of been snapped up or if they're still about, but you know. Right, so I've snipped that flower out. I can pop that flower on there. I can pop my button on top. See, now that button looks too big, so now I'm going to come off these sticky bags. We don't really want green, do we? That's greeny blue, not really. Oh, what about that grey one? Well, it's quite bulbous. That's something else you need to be a little bit aware of. Now that one looks like it's got sort of a pearlescence about it. Look at that. So I'm going to put that one in. So I need to finish off my stitching because I didn't tie that off, did I? So where is my thread? Here. Look. Making sure you don't stitch your pages together or anything random like that. Come through and pick that up, just the white piece, pull this through and trim that off. Job done. Because of course, remember, there's going to be another page stitched to that. You won't see any of that stitching. Right, so now on here, what we want, sorry, it's just got really hot here. I'm going to go in from the front because I'm going to be putting lace on it, aren't I, which will semi-hide that, and then just come back through, just as if you're sewing a normal button on. Pop your lace down, pick your lace up, put your button on. I mean, there's no rocket science here whatsoever. It's just about doing stitch work that is not necessarily the stitch work that you're used to, because, you know, normally, I don't know, you're stitching to make a picture or a garment of clothes or whatever, whereas this time round what we're doing is we're making it look like a book. But, you know, all your stitches and fabric cutting and everything is all exactly the same. And whenever I stitch on paper, I always put a bit of fabric there anyway to make the paper strong, because obviously you start stitching paper, you perforate it, it's going to fall apart. And then again, to get my thread a bit hidden, I'm going between the lace and the envelope, whoops, and then just trim that down. There you go. So now we've put an envelope into our journal, and we've got this like journal card tucked into it there. There you go. And the pink works with the all pink, you know, the blue background, because it's got the pink on it. We've got a little bit more blue here, so now I can start building blue into my journal as I go along. Hope and pray I was on screen doing that and not in my lap. And then, I mean, if you wanted to, depends on how fussy you want, you know, you could add a piece of something like this to that journal card, or you could reserve that for your envelope. Oh, now there's a problem, because look what I did. I had a great long piece here, can you see that? So I'm going to have to, oh, now here's a happy accident. Look how these things happen, right? So now, because I didn't pull my thread through far enough, because it was wrapped through my envelope, I can put a couple of beads on there and make that a dangle. Wasn't planning on doing it, but as it's happened, let's do it. So we've got this lovely one, which should be at the bottom, and then maybe what have I got? We've got, oh look, blue and white, blue. I think those three. So let's try and get this through. If it won't go through, then we're going to have to thread it, but I think it will. This is the trouble, where when you're filming you don't always have your eye in all the right places. which is how that thread got left wrapped around the book. You probably even noticed it, but obviously I didn't. So we're going to use it to our advantage, and I'll show you the simplest way to do a little dangle, because again, we are always doing dangles in journals. Okay, so I've put 2 beads on. I'm now going through this one that's got the nice sort of bottom, okay, and I'm going to tie it around this bottom one, at least twice. More fingers and thumbs now. At least twice like that. They're all going to come down there. What I'm going to do before I snip it, so I'm going to put a little tiny bit of glue on it to make sure that knot doesn't come undone. And that is exactly what I would do if this was a paper book. So I've tied it. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on there to hold that knot. And then I'm going to snip my strings. And then, oh, and throw a bead across the floor. Did you hear that? So then, when my page is in my book, like so, look, I've got a little dangle hanging over the top. Yeah? And it makes a lovely noise when you're working in your journal, because it sort of bangs and clashes on your desk. Okay, so that's that one. And then what I was saying was whether or not you wanted to add further decoration, because obviously we can put stuff in there, so you could make another one of these and pop that. While it's all not stitched together, it's a little bit, but look, you've got a journal card in there, secret pocket, lovely, if you didn't want to put it under there, or if you wanted to put, you know, something else under there, because we did talk about printing our own things. Now this one I've done like these, but I haven't yet stitched it, so that could go under there. Yeah, that could go under there. We've got a lovely dangle which will hang out the top, and then if you want to, you could decorate up your envelope. So you could maybe use something like this. You know, it depends on what lace and stuff you've got that you've pulled out. This one's a bit too white, or if you've got a bag which just fits. I mean, I've got this beautiful applique. Look at this, almost like it should be on a wedding dress. Oh, there's another bead. You could, you know, again, use bits of this type of lace across the bottom. You could even bring it higher, make another pocket in there. So if you went high like that, sort of diagonal, there's another pocket there. Or of course you could just put a lacy bit at the bottom. You could use just that piece, you know. I mean, it's whatever takes your fancy. There's I've got a whole doily here. I could take, you know, that corner quarter out, and there's another pocket, and just stitch it all around there. You have to just go with, you know, what you've got, because all of our supplies obviously are different. Put that one on there, tuck that in, whatever you want to do. You may want to leave it plain. The other thing is, if you leave it plain now, you can easily come back to it at another time. So I'm gonna put a snip about there. So I'm gonna tear down and give myself a bit of edge like that. Okay, tear it down, cut that edge off, and then maybe there. But then also we've got odd little bits like this, so you can just, you know, make yourself a piece that you can attach it to, because the thing is, you can't really stitch all these pieces down, because you'll have stitches that will cause a problem. So you'll need to do like I did here and get yourself a completely flat piece that you can then stitch all those pieces to, and then you can apply that piece to your base. So if we take something like this pink, this is just a dress lining, that's going to be perfect. So we'll give ourselves a snip there and tear that across. Okay, and that is going to hang off the edge and just be my, oh, we'll go, do you know what, yeah, no, it's going to hang there like that, and then I'm going to have a piece of this towards the top of it, because that's going to strengthen the top of my pocket. We'll add a piece of this on. I've got black lace here. I've got this lovely white one. Could add a piece of that on. That'll be gorgeous actually. So let's add, we'll snip down there. This is tiny crocheting knots. There we go. Going to add that piece on there as well. And then if you've got stamps, you could stamp on a piece of white and put an actual label on it. So I mean, if you wanted to, if you haven't, then you can go to my, you know, printing stuff video, and look, we'll snip out this label here, like so. You can obviously snip it all the way out, or you could just fold it under, and then it starts, you know, because you've got that label, it starts to look how you would expect a paper journal to look. So I'm now gonna pin this all the way through to that pink, because that's what's going to give us the stability of our pocket. And you can just go on making tags and things to make yourself happy. Here you go. So then if we trim this about there, get rid of all of those pieces, back to our stash. This is going to be stitched invisibly onto there. Okay. Now again, if you're worried about doing this, then do it before you stitch your envelope up. It's your project, you do it, you know, whichever order you want to do it. But I wanted to make sure I showed you the envelope, and I didn't know if we was going to have time. to mess around with this. So all your invisible stitching, and then just put your hand inside and stitch that down. There you go. So that's where we are at the moment with our fabric journal. I hope you're enjoying it. Hope you found some joy and inspiration, as I say. Stay safe. I'll see you very soon. Ta-ta for now.